Make sure y'all check them out. We'll be publicizing them online so y'all can kind of see what's going on. And like I said, I like to welcome everybody. So now we're starting on Facebook. So you've been in town for the last week, and so you'll be here the next week?
Yeah, I'll be here until the end of next week.
All right, so what you got going on, Rod? Like I said, you got a lot of fans.
Man, I'm working on a few things. When I went to Atlanta, I started doing some cold case work, which is pretty interesting to me. Cold case homicides and sexual assaults cases that, man, we closed cases that were crimes committed 30 years ago. So it's pretty fascinating the way DNA has evolved. So I've been fortunate enough to do that kind of stuff, kind of keep me busy.
Wow.
Working on some TV stuff as well.
Right.
Got a new show coming out. It's probably going to incorporate some of that kind of stuff. Some advanced DNA, some of the resources that police departments don't have. Say for instance, we can raise serial numbers that were taken off guns that were filed off, or just DNA that can link people to relatives that they didn't have. Phenotyping, you can kind of tell you what somebody looks like. So it's pretty interesting stuff.
Man, that is very interesting. Like I said, for those that are listening on the radio right now, we're playing a commercial on Facebook Live. But I mean, this actually gives me my first question. How is it difficult to actually investigate a case that happened 30 years ago? How do you even start an investigation like that?
Well, it used to be very difficult. But there are a couple different factors, and what I've learned over the last couple of years that I've been in this kind of work is that it's not necessarily just technology. It's the mindset. Some of the sexual assault cases that we work with, they involve, victims that were not considered worthy. So marginalized people. Maybe they were a sex worker, maybe they were this, on the street, homeless, mentally challenged. So people prey on people like that when they make crime reports and nobody really pays attention to it. That change of mindset, kind of equalizing people as victims. And the technology, it's actually pretty easy to close cases like that now.
So this can actually, you say without technology, it'll still be the same process, and you say maybe it'd be easier.
So yeah, same process. I think law enforcement and criminal investigations evolved quite a bit. And a lot of that has to do with people starting to realize that a victim is a victim. You don't have to be rich and white to be a victim. You don't have to, be, somebody of importance as society may deem them to be. So
right.
It's starting to evolve a bit.
All right. So for those that are tuned in on Facebook Live right now, you see the man on the screen, and we were just kind of talking about, actually initiating an investigation that happened so many years ago, and we were just kind of talking about it. He was just giving some really good, detailed information about it. So, for our Facebook Live audience, like I said, I want to formally welcome you again to Before the Vision. And, we kind of talk offline, So with Before the Vision is about entrepreneurship. We also try to find people that's done, very positive things in the neighborhood, cities that they worked in or were raised in. And I know that you are a role model in the city. And like I said, I'm very appreciative that you're here with us today and we're able to have this discussion about you.
I appreciate you.
All right, so man, okay, we know you're retired.
Yeah.
And how long have you been retired for those that are watching?
Since 2018. So.
How is retirement?
Oh, man, it's amazing. I get to go fishing, man. I bought a boat. I mean, it's just life as a police officer, homicide detective. I really didn't know how much I was missing out on. Okay. I was at work 24 hours a day, man. It seemed like, and now, going to ball games and kind of relaxing a little bit, kind of getting back to who I was before I became a homicide detective, and it's an interesting challenge. Okay,
so before we get into you, we had a discussion offline. So right now, you're an Atlanta Hawks fan, Atlanta Falcons fan. For those that are watching, this may be some of y'all may not know, some of y'all may do. The Hawks they're fighting pretty well. Like I said, you said they're ranked 4th in the Eastern Conference right now, and they've secured their playoff spot.
Oh yeah.
No way they can drop and play in the play or anything like that.
The farthest they can go is to 6 now, so they're there.
Okay, so with your expertise and you being, for those that can actually see, they see the caption and the picture of you, Murder Chose Me. With you actually doing this film, and we kind of discussed it offline. What have you been privileged to as far as, going to games? Because we kind of talked about it. I mean, can you kind of tell us about those experiences?
Yeah, there's a whole nother world after that. After I got Murder Chose Me, I met so many different people, and a lot of them were celebrities. I met a lot of athletes because I am a Hawks fan, so I had the opportunity to hang out with the Hawks. Man, I went to Miami with the Hawks, went to Vegas with the Hawks, just through connections with some of my friends who are also in TV. So it's been pretty interesting. I think probably the coolest thing is that you start to see the world as big as it is.
Okay.
When you're at home and you know everybody in your circle, it's kind of a small little world. But when you start to see what everybody else is doing, it kind of makes the world a huge place and a really exciting place.
All right, so when you meet these celebrities and these big political figures, are they asking you about what you do or even trying to get information about crime or anything like that?
Yeah, people are fascinated about crime for whatever reason. And everybody I meet wants to know something about homicide investigation. Hey, God, I saw this show, man. What's it really like? People are really fascinated by that. Like you and I would be fascinated about pro basketball. They're fascinated about true crime. So it's a pretty interesting thing to know that somebody's actually interested in what you do. And I guess I never really saw it that way. All
right. So, like I said, for those that are tuning in, Rodney Demery, where are you from, man?
I was born in Shreveport.
What part of Shreveport are you from?
I was actually born in Shreveport, but my family was in Campy.
Okay.
So Campy is such a small place. My mother had my brother and I here in Shreveport.
Okay.
By the time I was 3, I grew up in New Mexico. So when I was 3, I moved to Mexico, and my grandparents raised me after my mother was killed. So I grew up in New Mexico, went to high school there. That's home. Came back to Shreveport throughout my childhood because my father lives here in Shreveport.
All right, so you mentioned, I don't know how sensitive a subject this is. You mentioned that your mother was killed.
Mm-hmm.
Did that inspire you as far as becoming, law enforcement?
I think a lot of people think it did, and I guess it did kind of indirectly. When I worked homicide, my mindset wasn't, my mother was killed, so I'm going after people who killed people. It was more of a, growing up, my grandparents. My mother was their daughter, and she was killed at the age of 21. I had to watch my grandparents grieve my mother. My grandmother not knowing what happened, not knowing who committed the crime. So when I became a homicide detective, it was impossible for me to go home, until I found out who killed this person.
Right.
If I go tell this woman or this man, hey, your child was murdered, I felt a responsibility. I got to do it, and sometimes I stay at work 3 or 4 days to make it happen. So I think indirectly it affected me, but not directly. It wasn't because of my mother that motivated me. It was probably watching the people around me that were left to survive that watch them deal with that. So
okay. So piggybacking off what you said as far as when you get an investigation, you could be working 3 or 4 days. How did that affect your personal life? I know you have children.
That was the tough part, and I didn't have a personal life, kind of thought I did, but I really didn't. My son, he would always be like, "Daddy, you got to go to work." You got to go get bad people. Yeah, son. And I'm watching this little kid. He's telling me not to get hurt at work. It's just a little boy, right? And I guess I didn't realize how much being away from home or being away from my children was a factor. Of course, they knew I was at work. They knew what I was doing. But now it's like, hey, my son's having an honor ceremony this week or next week. It's like, Dad, you coming? Yeah. I'm not working. So
right.
I think it's not really a career that kind of it doesn't promote family. It doesn't promote any sense of being home. It's something that keeps you out in the street.
Okay. And did you feel any sense of danger with the profession that you're in, as far as with what you were doing? Did you ever feel like any type of maybe fear for, safety of your family because of some of the investigations? Anybody tried to, kind of tamper with you because of
No,
what?
no. And, ironically, it was probably the opposite. The whole time I worked in Shreveport, the community took care of me. And I see the way things are going now in policing, and I can't imagine having police in that environment because for me, people took care of me. I mean, people would see me whether I'm in Cedar Grove, Cooper Road, you want something to eat, people would bring me over the house. Um, they took care of me. Something was going to happen, or they wanted somebody out of the neighborhood that was violent and dangerous. They call you up. I mean, it was a sense of family. So policing is, from what I'm reading and seeing lately, it's taking a whole other world.
Right.
They don't really trust the police, or they don't talk to the police. But no, I didn't feel a lot of danger. A lot of people looked out for me, and a lot of people prayed for me. So Shreveport was a breeze.
And I don't know, if this would be a sensitive topic to talk about, but as far as you mentioning about how policing has changed and, the events that have happened and I guess been happening over time with innocent people being, killed. What's your thought or perspective on that? Just that, or
when I came into police work, man, it was different. People, police officers were different. They realized that they worked for the community.
Right.
They realized that they served the community. I saw things change when the war on drugs came about. Then it came into this place where you didn't wear these neat uniforms with your whistle and your hat. They started wearing fatigues, and they started to go out there and kick in doors and do all this stuff that they thought was productive. The reality is that it separated the community from the police, and they became an occupying force. So that mindset, us against them against us, it doesn't work. And I think people are starting to realize now that wasn't going to work, and it never will work.
So you're retired. You've been retired since 2018. If you were working now, and you post, I guess maybe pre-retirement, do you think that you would probably be wanting to retire a whole lot sooner, or do you think that as far as your element in being an officer, would that change your day-to-day operations and how you deal with it?
I think each individual police officer has to make a decision. Either you're called to do that job or you're not. And the ones that have a tough time policing, they may not rethink their calling. It's because policing is service. And if I were working today, it would be the same as when I did work. Your sincerity, your honesty, and going talking to people that need you. People believe in you, they trust you, you make things happen. I don't know that I would have ever gotten to a point where I was at odds with the community.
Right.
And that's kind of where they are now.
Okay.
It's a different environment, a huge difference. And you can, the last 5 years, you can see it. It's just insane.
And I guess my last question before we kind of change the subject and change, the mood. Do you think that racism is a big part of law enforcement when it comes to minorities?
And I really want to be clear on this. I know coming up through the police ranks for 31 years that there are racist policemen. I know this to be true. But the other thing that I think we kind of sell ourselves short on, our community sells ourselves short on, are abusive police in general. I've arrested Black police officers. I know Black police officers, Hispanic police officers that have committed horrible atrocities and crimes against the community.
Correct.
I think we get lost in the fact that it's a racist system. And that's not to say it's not, because there are truly enough racist police officers. But there are evil police officers. There are police officers that, they're power hungry. They're heavy-handed. They beat people. They force themselves in the community. So if you ever want to find out whether or not they're racist police officers, ask an inner city kid. They'll tell you they have the same abuse of power from all races of police. So to answer that question, policing has an element of power-hungry, corrupt people. It's not to say all of them, because we all know great police officers who dedicate their lives to it. But there's just enough to make the situation bad. If you want to find out, just ask somebody in the inner city. They'll tell you. They'll say, what, hey, doesn't matter if he's white or black, he beat me, or he stole something from me, or mishandled me in some way. That's a power. It's an abuse of power thing, and that's what we really need to work on.
Okay. So, I want to kind of go back to retirement, man. Retirement for 2 years since 2018, man. So you've been traveling. You bought a boat. So, all right, being able to travel, we know that you are a U.S. Navy veteran.
Mm-hmm.
So with you being in the military, you've been able to travel the world. And compared to when you were able to do it as a military official and being retired, how has that experience been?
Yeah, it's different. Traveling now is, you actually get to enjoy it.
Okay.
So when I was in the military, we were out, man, I was out in Desert Storm, we're in Iraq, we're in Turkey, we're in Saudi Arabia, and there's that level of tension, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like, I'll go somewhere and I'm enjoying it. I'm looking at the beauty, I'm looking at the culture, and it's night and day. The world is a beautiful place, and I think that anybody that has the opportunity, to see it, and I would encourage that anyway. Whether that be the military or just saving up money until you get to a different place. But gosh, it's a beautiful world, and I think that's probably the thing that I've seen most since I've left police work.
Okay, so some of those places that you were, able to travel as a military vet, would you go and visit those places now since you're retired? Do you have plans on visiting?
Oh yeah. I'm actually planning to go to Italy. I went to Italy when I was in the military, in France. I'd love to do that again.
Okay.
Japan.
Okay. All right. So now we want to get into Murder Chose Me, and how did this opportunity come about? What happened to merge Rodney Demery with ID-A&E? How did this merger happen?
This is it's a pretty deep story.
Okay.
But we talked earlier about my mother's murder.
Right.
Well, when I was 28, my brother went to prison for murder. So I had it on both sides. I lost a loved one, and my brother went to prison for murder. And I was working homicide. And if you're a believer, and I am, I know God makes things happen for a reason. So all these things happen. And I start working homicide. Well, while I'm working homicide, I realized that I'm really good at it. I'm really making these cases happen. And, I start to try to figure out how did this happen. Well, about that time, I get a call from a production company in Knoxville, Tennessee. Jupiter Entertainment called me up and said, hey, we are going over this story of a murder you worked in Shreveport on the Cooper Road. A little girl was killed, a pregnant girl. Tavia Seals was murdered. They called me up and asked me, could they do that story on a show called Fatal Attraction? They did that show. Then they did another show on another show called Justice by Any Means. And man, 3-4 weeks later, they called me up and asked me if I wanted to do a show. So the show is all about my backstory and all the things that happened and the murders that I worked and the murders that I experienced in my own lifetime. After I started working the show, I started to realize that it was a bigger thing. It wasn't a show about me or my work. It was a show about homicide and people experiencing murder and experiencing what I have experienced. All my life, I felt like I had a calling, and my grandparents used to say I was going to be a preacher, and I went to seminary as a matter of fact. But
right, Morehouse, right?
Yeah. But I didn't really believe that I was a preacher, a pulpit preacher, and I started to realize that God didn't call me to preach in a pulpit. He called me to be a minister for this type of thing. And when I look back on some of the cases that I worked in Shreveport's a very small place, but there are people all over the world, that mourn with the people in Shreveport. They know the names of some of the murder victims here. And, those prayers and that world just became smaller for everybody in Shreveport. And I thought, what, this is actually what it's all about. This is the ministry, to get people to feel things, get people to understand other people. And, even in Shreveport, man, the neighborhoods started to come together and start to realize that, this sister got killed or this brother got killed. And people start talking more about it. And that's God's work. It had nothing to do with me.
Right.
I just happened to be the instrument used.
Okay. So I want to continue, along the journey of, we kind of talked offline and, I know like with the interview, they say you have something else coming soon.
Yeah.
Do you want to kind of touch on it?
Yeah. Well, I got a great production team, man. Some amazing people. We're working on some stories. Basically it's about cases that are people are victimized that are not rich. They're not white. We probably have 7,000 or 8,000 Black people murdered in the United States, and nobody seems to talk a lot about it. So what we want to do is bring that kind of thing to the communities. and say, you know what, hey, we got this DNA. We got this forensic expert. We got these psychological ways of looking at cases and kind of make it happen and try to bring some justice for people that haven't had it. You know, there's that cold case thing where people go way back decades to try to close cases, but you know, you got cases that may have happened 5 years ago that family doesn't have any resolve to that. So those kind of cases like that, looking at making sure people are afforded any justice possible.
Okay. So now I know that you don't reside here anymore.
Right.
But I know, are you aware of the violent crimes here, you know, the gun violence here? And, you know, what you think about that? And is there any insight that you could provide to maybe help us, to help our community so we can try to bridge the gap?
I think there's a couple of things that are happening, and that divide is, for whatever reason, there's some sort of problem between the community and the police. And when that happens, you're destined to fail. You know, I had an old policeman tell me a long time ago, he said, you know, when you have the people in the community and they fear the criminals more than they trust the police or respect the police, you got a huge problem. And what happens is you have violent crime, you have crimes that are committed inside the city, but for whatever reason, people don't feel comfortable talking to the police. That's a problem. And crime starts to rise, and you know, it's almost blatant. The other problem with that is if you have 5 or 6 people killed in Shreveport and the homicides aren't closed, you know, you got all these open cases, and people are starting to think, well, maybe you just don't know what you're doing. And that's not to say they don't, but that effort needs to be made. Some way, somehow, that gap has got to be bridged, where that trust and that confidence in your police department that, you know, something happens, I'm going to go tell the police, and something's going to actually happen. You know?
Right.
You know, that's got to come back. It seems really simple, but for whatever reason, it's not happening. And we definitely got to get to that.
Okay. Like I said, now I don't want to take too much more of your time. Like I said, I really appreciate this interview. You know, like I hold this dear to my heart because, you know, we've talked before, and I've been waiting for this day to happen. Man, I want to talk about, and I think I'm getting a little bit more out subject. Man, you remember Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated?
Yes, sir.
So you have a network unimaginable.
Yeah.
With what you do and what you've learned from actually being a part of that fraternity. Has it helped you in your journey with your law enforcement career and even after, within your retirement?
Yeah, you know what, Kappa has definitely helped me grow. You know, I knew a lot of good brothers here in Shreveport chapter, Boulder City. But you know, when I started to go out, I met some really, really good brothers. I mean, some brothers from Morehouse, Clark, you know, Tuskegee. I mean, just brothers that were from all over. And what I've learned is that we have the ability, and you know, sometimes it's discouraging when we don't think we have it, but we have the ability to uplift each other. I mean, everything that I've done in Atlanta and all the places that I've been has been because of another brother. You know,
right.
A brother has brought me in and said, "Hey, go do this. I need to help you with that. I need you to meet this person." And likewise, you know, I kind of reciprocate that. So brothers putting brothers on. CAP is all about brotherhood, and brotherhood can come in any form. So yeah, absolutely, man. There's a hope there that we really need to kind of start to come back. Yeah, brothers need to come back.
All right. So what advice would you give anyone that's wanting to take the route that you've taken as far as having a law enforcement career and maybe becoming a detective in their career? What type of advice would you give them? You know, and if you don't mind, what are some of the trials and tribulations you face?
Yeah,
as an officer?
I think the first thing is for someone to realize that it's not about you. You know, it's all about your service to somebody else, and be prepared to give up a huge chunk of your life to that. Police work is gonna hurt. You know, it's heartbreaking, and you know, I don't mind sharing some of the ups and downs of it. I mean, when I first started police work, man, in 1988, I remember, you know, being one of only 2 Black police officers on a police department. And, you know, Kenny Reed, you know, Kenny Wright, is he related to this criminal, this, that, and the other. So there's that element that you have to deal with. You're exposed to things that you just don't believe people can do. You see things that you can't understand how somebody can do that to another human being. Flip side of the coin, though, it's the most rewarding thing on earth. I mean, you cannot go a day without feeling good about something that you've done for somebody else. Every day is different. So I think the advice to get into that line of work was, if you're called to it and you're dedicated to it, you should probably absolutely do it. If you get in for any other reason, it's not going to be.
Okay, for your fans, if people want to reach out to you, is there any handles you want to drop for us?
Let's see. My Instagram is I am Rod Demery. I got a Facebook page, but I pop on and I try to answer and talk to everybody that comes on.
So retirement, you have time to actually do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
All right, man. Hey, like I said, you've been on Before the Vision. So we really appreciate you, man. Like once you come and chill with the goats, you become a goat. So we got to send some apparel your way. And, like I said, I really appreciate you, man.
Oh, yeah, much love. I appreciate you having me.
Hey, for those listening on the radio, you already know when you get that call, you're up. This is Before the Vision. I'm Shady Will. We will holler at you. Holla!